Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, somebody made a comment on a video of mine, and it was actually an older video. It was back from when I was looking at 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. They made a comment about the D20 being a rather swingy die. So I asked them to clarify, and it turns out they did not mean what I thought they meant. But I'm going to talk about that in a subsequent video, which is really about like when do you roll in the first place? Should you roll at all? However, this comes up every once in a while. People will say that the D20 is swingy, and sometimes they're just repeating what they heard somebody else said because it sounds profound. I've made some videos about this in the past, but I think it kind of bears repeating. And the last video that I could find where I talked about this was really long because I'm long-winded. So I figured maybe I'd get to the point a little bit faster in this video and give some examples that I didn't give in that last one. But very often, you'll hear people say that the D20 is swingy. It's got a lot of data points. You roll this die when you're playing a game, and it could come up 15, like it just did here. It could come up 2, it could come up 1, it could come up 20, it could come up all over the place. There's no real predictability. You use some other die mechanic, like let's say you're using a 3d6 mechanic, like something like GURPS or whatever, and okay, like great. Right now, what did I roll? I rolled a 10. That's very common because that's where it tends to cluster, all right? And that happens very often. It's not going to be that often that you're rolling outside of that. In fact, in something like 3d6, you're going to roll somewhere between 9 and 12, and that's at about 48.14% of the time. Between 8 and 13, over 67% of the time. It clusters in the middle. Even with a 2d6 mechanic, with a not quite so steep bell curve, here I've rolled a 4, which is rather unusual because I'm going to roll between like 5 and 9 about 2/3 of the time. It really clusters in the middle. It's much more predictable. It's much less swingy if you're using this as a roll and total mechanic. If the numbers on the dice actually mean something. What am I talking about? Well, here's the thing. Very often, most games that use the D20 as a randomizer, they're not using it as a roll and total mechanic. They're using it as a roll and sort mechanic. What am I talking about? Roll this die. Let's say, my chance of success, or like my target number is a 12. Okay, great. I've rolled a 14. I can sort it. I can put it over here in the success pile because I'm looking for either a success or a failure. If I rolled, now as I say I rolled a 4, well, I can put it over here in the failure pile. Now, it's just one die. I'm not rolling a whole bunch of dice like I would be in Ubiquity if I'm rolling a bunch of, say, D6s and I'm looking for evens. Here, I roll this right now. Okay, I've got a 6, and a 1. I can put these 2 6s in the success pile. I put the 1 in the failure pile. I've sorted them. It's roll and sort. And now I have 2 successes. It doesn't matter because I'm looking for evens in this example if these came up 6, 4, or 2. Really irrelevant. The numbers on the dice are irrelevant. Just like this 1 is irrelevant. It could have been a 1, a 3, or a 5. That's a failure. I sort these things into 2 camps. Numbers on the dice are irrelevant. If I'm playing something like, say, GURPS, okay, well, now I'm rolling 3d6, and let's see what I roll here. I rolled a 5. This is a roll and total mechanic. I don't know what the target number I was looking for. Let's just say it was bigger than 5. Now, this thing as a whole is a failure, but the numbers on these dice actually mean something. 1, 1, 3, it's 5. I'm totaling it all up. If I'm playing a game with 2d6, like I'm playing Powered by the Apocalypse, wow, I got an 11. That's pretty cool. All right? That's a success, but also those numbers are important. What number I actually got is actually important. In almost every single game that uses the D20, the number that comes up on this die is entirely irrelevant. It's either a success or a failure. Yes, there are some variations where 20 occasionally is a critical success, usually just in combat. And sometimes that has to be, confirmed before you say, okay, that's a critical. Sometimes, much less frequently, a 1 is a critical failure. It doesn't show up an awful lot because people don't like it. So in the actual written rules of the game, this is important, the number that shows up on this die is entirely irrelevant. For the most part, there are no degrees of success or failure in D20 games, which is a good thing because there's a variety of reasons why that's good, which maybe I'll get into, maybe I won't, maybe I'll talk about it later. You're looking for success or failure. Let's just say, for example, that I have doing something with a DC of 6. What are my chances of success? 75%. Not easy to figure out, like on the fly, okay? I got a 16 here. I've succeeded. It's irrelevant if I got a 16, if I got a 6, if I got a 20, if I got a 15. Doesn't matter. I could put stars on, 15 faces of this die and have 15 faces of this die be completely empty, and it would do exactly the same thing. In fact, it would probably be better if I did that because the numbers are irrelevant. If I roll 1, a 2, a 3, 4, 5, All those are failures in this particular example. It doesn't matter which one I rolled. If my DC happened to be something like 12, well, there's this whole range. I could roll an 11. An 11 doesn't mean I just missed it. It doesn't. The number on this die is entirely irrelevant. It is not swingy. All right, let's look at, say, the 3d6 mechanic instead. Okay, let's say my DC is 9. I need to get at least a 9 to succeed. That's about the same. It's 74.7%. I figured this out beforehand. I roll these dice. 48.14% of the time, I'm going to roll between a 9 and a 12. It clusters there. 67.58% of the time, I'm going to roll between 8 and 13. The numbers are going to cluster there. Based on the numbers that I see coming up over and over and over again, this die pool is not very swingy. It's going to be very unusual for me to see a 3 or an 18. Less than 0.5% for either one of them, as opposed to 5% of a 1 or 20 on this die. Is this less swingy? It is if the number matters. If you're just looking for a success or failure, it absolutely does not matter. Rolling these 3 dice against the difficulty of 9, I'm going to succeed roughly 75% of the time. 25% of the time, I'm going to fail. Rolling this die against a DC of 6, I'm going to succeed 75% of the time, and 25% of the time, I'm going to fail. It is irrelevant what number actually shows up on this die. It's not swingy. It's not any more swingy than this is. Why do we think it's more swingy? It's because we're assigning narrative weight or value to the numbers on this die when they don't actually exist in the rules. And if you say all of a sudden, well, hey, Ivan, I like to do that. It's human nature. I want to have these numbers mean something. That's great. You're not playing the game as written. The die is swingy because you made it swingy. It's not swingy in the rules of the game.